Robert here, back with another video. This time, I'm going to review the iPod Touch 4th generation. Is it still usable in 2017? This is my iPod. It's gone through a couple of case changes over the years, but I bought this in 2011, around November 2011. So, it's been almost 6 years. So it's been more than 5 years since I bought it. And okay, so do I still use it? That's a question that I'm sure you're gonna ask. Yes, I still use it for most of my communications. So this is it turned on. As you can see, the time. So the time works, but it updates only to iOS 6.1.6, which means I can't upgrade the software, the operating system to iOS 7 or later. And most apps still work, but will not update unless I have iOS 7 or later, which this iPod does not support. So I may have to buy a new one, or a used one of the newer generation, but a used one. Okay, this thing came out in September 2010, this particular generation of the iPod Touch. But since then, a lot of things have changed with, better camera, with the new iPod Touch 6th or 7th generation, and also a lot bigger screen, which I'll talk about soon. So, the 4th generation of the iPod Touch came out September 2010. So, what are the features that this thing had over the previous generations, the first generation, second generation, and third generation didn't have? Well, now it's the processor was Apple's, I believe, A4 processor, which at the time in 2010 was pretty fast. But performance is not limited to the processor. I don't know how much RAM this thing has, but RAM is also part of basically how they transfer data from the hard drive and into the RAM. And what you see in the display is iOS 6.1.6, and it's mostly from the hard drive to the RAM. So what you're seeing is actually from the RAM, the random access memory. I think it's like 512 megabytes at the time, or less. I don't know. Anyway, battery life. It's not as good as it was when it was new. When I bought it. It charges in a decent rate, around 1.5 to 2 hours, but the battery depletes around the same amount of time. So basically, I'm getting almost a 1-to-1 ratio in terms of charging time versus battery depletion time. So kind of a 1-to-1 ratio. It has Wi-Fi and also Bluetooth capability, but since it's an iPod Touch, you're not going to expect 4G or 3G capability. Although you can buy like one of these MiFi routers that will convert like 3G or 4G into Wi-Fi, and it'll give you another Wi-Fi access point, which may be necessary. And it's still a great music player, and video player with 32 gigabytes of storage for music, apps, and videos. So let me look at my settings to show you I will show you how much storage I have. Due to some kind of formatting issue, let me see if I can quit it right there. Yeah, due to some kind of formatting issue, I don't know why it won't focus, do an autofocus. So basically, as you can see I have 252 megabytes available, but 11.1 gigabytes of those is videos, and 1.5 gigabytes is photos and camera. So it has a camera, couple cameras, and 8 gigabytes of music. So, and it's still decent, especially for its storage. It's got a lot of apps. This was the first iPod that had FaceTime and a voice control app that um, that you can at least you can put voice commands and say, play such and such song or things like that. It has a messages app, but it's not really that good. Now, this FaceTime uses Wi-Fi only. It has a Safari web browser, of course, and you can download apps for other web browsers like Chrome, Firefox, and the like. The Mail app still works very well. I still use the Mail app. One of the most that I use. And I have like 3 accounts plus the iCloud account. Yeah. And as you can see, it's a 3.5-inch touchscreen from here all the way to there. So it's a very small touchscreen compared to the newer iPod Touch generations. Okay, some apps you can't download due to the apps requiring at least iOS 7 or later, such as Instagram and many other apps. Requires iOS 7 or later. And some apps and games do actually need a bigger screen. It's really hard to kind of play or tap the screen if you have a very small screen. So screen size is, pretty important. But not really as important as the actual functionality of the apps themselves. Okay, so some games and apps need a bigger screen, like a 4-inch screen, like the iPhone SE. Camera. So the camera in the back, here's the camera right here, and this is about 5 megapixels, and this is a 2 megapixel front-facing camera that is mostly for Skype and FaceTime. I used to use this for Skype, and I even tried FaceTime with it. It's pretty good. It does not use HDR for image processing for the camera, and it works pretty well. I'll have to show you a photo directly from the iPod Touch to show you kind of what the photos from this generation of the iPod Touch look like. But I'll show you something from the camera roll took. So, right here. I know it's a little fuzzy, but at least it will work. I'll put one of those cameras, well, some of those pictures on there. And of course they have a decent thing like that, and as you can see, it also has a way to turn on the grid. And the grid is basically a set of lines on the screen, just like tic-tac-toe, except this is used for the rule of thirds. And the rule of thirds for the camera is basically you line up the subject on one of the third, either vertical or horizontal lines, and in the intersection between those two lines actually is the optimal place to put the subject in it instead of in the center, to kind of give it more of a variety and special look. So the photos are decent. They're not like super clear, but they're a little grainy, but they're still decent, especially in good light. It doesn't work very well in low light. So video capture okay as well, but again, there's this issue on space. When I do video captures, it stopped many times due to space running out. Let me just rapid fire through this last part and we'll be good. So there's no SD or micro SD card slot available on the iPod Touch to expand storage. This is my second case that I bought since 2011. So there's really no way to expand storage, and you usually needs a case, even though it has round edges and things like that. And the speaker, there's a speaker on this thing, just like the current iPod Touch. So that's one thing you won't lose if you go back from a later iPod Touch to now, to this generation. And you have full access to the iOS App Store, but given some apps, as I mentioned, some apps aren't able to download and install due to them not being compatible with iOS 7 or 8 or later. So you may be missing out on some apps. But it'll still work with apps, such as the YouVersion Bible app and Facebook and Google Hangouts and even WeatherBug and Walmart. And the brightness fades outside a little bit, so you need to turn the brightness up when you're outside using the battery, and that way you actually use the battery a lot. So, and it doesn't have quick settings or easy access to settings like most Android phones do. And of course, here's my Android phone, and all I have to do is do that, and then put it down, and I have my quick settings right there. Let me try that again. Right there. I have my quick settings right there. Even though I have to put in my code, but still. And it still sounds great, overall. In a small room, this is perfect for a small room. And it still has a 3.5mm headphone jack, which is here, right there. And the alarm clock works very well. I get up on Sunday mornings with this thing, with this alarm clock. The metronome app and other apps are slow to open up, but they work. Especially the metronome app, which I use a lot as I'm a musician. You can watch YouTube videos on it. I did that recently. Use it. Now, here's the thing. It uses a 30-pin. The old 30-pin connector to connect to the computer or to a power source to charge the device and also transfer data to the iPod. So it does not use the lightning cable. So you're going to go back to the old 30-pin connector. May be good, may not be. And this is kind of how it connects right here. No GPS, but the map apps still work to an extent if you're in a Wi-Fi network. if you have Wi-Fi access, then the map apps will still work. You just won't be able to have GPS functionality. And I'm sure you can see here, it smudges pretty easily. There's a few smudges on here as I've been touching the screen all over the place. So you need to clean this thing, the screen, periodically at the very least. There's an app that you can use it as a PowerPoint presentation clicker. That's one way to do it, with the Logitech app or something like that. I'm sure there are others too, but the Logitech one is the one I use. And it's a decent e-reader with enough space to read, you know, books with the Kindle app and also the Apple's Books app. I think it's called iBooks. And it still has the Find iPhone feature, just like the iPhone. You just don't get the 3G, 4G capability. Still has an iTunes app, and you can connect it to iTunes. However, I've been having trouble getting iTunes to recognize the iPod on the Windows 10 computer currently. Probably need some driver updates. So, well, that's all I've noticed for this. The iPod Touch 4th generation. So is it still functional and usable in 2017? Yes. Would I want to use it all the time? Not necessarily. But I am kind of thinking of getting an iPod Touch 5th or 6th generation soon. So be on the lookout for that if I ever buy one. But I'm most likely going to buy a used one. That's, you know, like a refurbished one that's decent. Okay, that's all I have for today, and have a wonderful day, and see you in the next video.